What if the biggest danger in life is not failure, but forgetting to be ready? Why did Jesus compare his followers to servants waiting through the night for their master to return? And could it be possible that spiritual alertness matters more than timing, success, or even comfort? In Luke 12, verse 35 to 48, Jesus continues teaching his disciples after speaking about worry, wealth, and trust in God. But now the focus shifts from anxiety to readiness. Be dressed ready for service and keep your lamps burning. At first, this sounds simple, but in the ancient world, this image carried deep meaning. Servants in wealthy households had responsibilities that required constant readiness. They could not predict exactly when their master would return from a wedding banquet. It could be early evening, late night, or even near dawn. So they had to stay prepared at all times. Lamps needed to remain lit, belts tied, clothing secured, attention alert. Jesus uses this image to describe spiritual life, not passive belief, not occasional faith, but active readiness. Be like servants waiting for their master to return from a wedding banquet, so that when he comes and knocks, they can immediately open the door for him. This is not a story about fear. It is a story about awareness, about living with purpose and expectation. Then Jesus says something surprising. It will be good for those servants whose master finds them watching when he comes. Notice the word watching. Not distracted, not careless, not spiritually asleep, but alert, engaged, faithfully present. And then Jesus adds a shocking promise. The master will dress himself to serve, will have them recline at the table, and will come and wait on them. This reverses normal expectations completely. In human society, masters are served by servants. But Jesus describes a master who serves his servants. This points towards something deeper about God's kingdom. God is not like earthly rulers. He honors faithfulness. He responds to readiness with blessing. He surprises those who remain faithful in unseen moments. Then Jesus emphasizes timing. If he comes in the middle of the night or toward daybreak and finds them so, it will be good for them. In other words, the exact timing of his return is unknown, but readiness is always required. That leads Peter to ask a question. Lord, are you telling this parable to us or to everyone? Jesus does not directly answer with a simple yes or no. Instead, he expands the teaching. Who then is the faithful and wise manager, whom the master puts in charge of his servants to give them their food allowance at the proper time? Now the focus shifts from general readiness to responsibility. Some servants are entrusted with leadership roles, stewardship, care for others, responsibility within the household. Jesus is describing spiritual leadership and accountability. And then he says, it will be good for that servant whom the master finds doing so when he returns. Faithfulness is not only about waiting, it is about continuing to do what is right while waiting. Consistency matters, integrity matters, responsibility matters. Then comes a warning. But suppose the servant says to himself, my master is taking a long time in coming, and he then begins to beat the other servants, to eat and drink and get drunk. This describes a shift in mindset. When expectation of accountability fades, behavior changes. Delay can produce carelessness. When people think consequences are far away, discipline weakens. The servant begins to abuse authority, indulge selfish desires, forget responsibility. And Jesus shows the outcome. The master of that servant will come on a day when he does not expect him, and at an hour he is not aware of. Unexpected return, sudden accountability, and he will cut him to pieces and assign him a place with the unbelievers. These are strong words. They emphasize seriousness, not casual spirituality. Jesus is not describing randomness. He is describing moral accountability under God's authority. Then he explains further. The servant who knows the master's will and does not get ready or does not do what the master wants will be beaten with many blows. Knowledge increases responsibility. When someone understands truth but ignores it, accountability becomes greater. But the one who does not know and does things deserving punishment will be beaten with few blows. There is still accountability, but the level differs. Then Jesus concludes this section with a powerful principle. From everyone who has been given much, much will be demanded, and from the one who has been entrusted with much, much more will be asked. This statement reveals a universal spiritual truth. Responsibility grows with privilege. Knowledge brings accountability. Opportunity brings responsibility. Blessing brings stewardship. This teaching is not meant to create fear alone. It is meant to create awareness. Many people think spiritual life is passive. Believe once, wait comfortably, live however you want. But Jesus presents a very different picture. Faith is active, ongoing, watchful, responsible. Faithfulness is tested not only in moments of crisis, but in ordinary time, in waiting seasons, in delays, in everyday decisions when no one is watching. That is where spiritual character is revealed. And perhaps this is why Jesus repeatedly uses the image of servants at night. Night represents uncertainty, delay, silence, waiting. In darkness, it is easier to become careless, to fall asleep spiritually, to lose focus. But Jesus calls his followers to remain alert even in darkness, because darkness is often where faith is tested most deeply. This teaching connects strongly with human experience today. People naturally struggle with waiting for answers, waiting for change, waiting for justice, waiting for fulfillment. And during waiting, spiritual drift often happens quietly. People may begin strong in faith but slowly lose focus over time. Not because of sudden rebellion, but gradual distraction. Jesus addresses exactly that danger. Watchfulness is not emotional intensity, it is consistent faithfulness over time. It is staying aligned with God's will, even when outcomes are delayed. Then there is another important theme in this passage: stewardship. The servant is not an owner, he is a manager of what belongs to the master. That distinction changes everything. Everything entrusted is temporary: time, abilities, influence, resources. They are not ultimate possessions, they are responsibilities, and how they are used matters deeply. Jesus emphasizes that faithfulness is measured not by appearance, but by obedience, not by potential, but by action. And importantly, this teaching is not about perfection, it is about direction. Faithful servants may struggle, but they remain committed. They continue serving. They continue watching. They continue living according to the Master's will. Then Jesus' final principle brings everything together. Greater responsibility leads to greater accountability. This can sound heavy, but it is also meaningful, because it shows that God values trust. He entrusts more to those who are faithful. In life, this principle is often visible even outside spiritual contexts. People who handle small responsibilities well are often given larger ones. Trust grows through faithfulness. But spiritually, this becomes even more significant, because what is entrusted is not only material, but eternal impact. Influence on others, truth shared, faith lived out. Jesus is preparing his disciples for a life of responsibility, not passivity. He is shaping leaders who remain faithful, whether he is visibly present or not. And that connects to the deeper theme of this passage, living as though God is always near. Not in fear, but in awareness. Not in anxiety, but in faithful readiness. There is a balance here. Jesus already told them not to worry about life earlier in Luke 12. Now he tells them to be watchful. So this is not about anxious fear of punishment. It is about loving readiness, a heart aligned with God's will, a life lived intentionally. And perhaps one of the most important insights is this: watchfulness is not about predicting the future, it is about being faithful in the present. Because no one knows the exact timing of life's events, but everyone can choose faithfulness today. And that is where spiritual maturity grows, in daily decisions, in private integrity, in consistent obedience, in perseverance during waiting. Jesus' teaching also reminds believers that life is not random. There is accountability, there is meaning, there is purpose behind actions, and one day, everything is brought to the light. But for those who are faithful, that moment is not terrifying, it is fulfilling, because it confirms a life lived in alignment with God. The image of the Master serving faithful servants is especially powerful. It reveals that God's response to faithfulness is not merely judgment, but honor, reward, joy, relationship. This is not a distant, cold system. It is a relational kingdom, a Master who recognizes faithfulness and responds with generosity beyond expectation. That transforms how believers view responsibility, not as burden alone, but as opportunity. To live meaningfully, to serve faithfully, to reflect God's character in daily life. So watchfulness is not passive waiting, it is active living. It is faith expressed through consistency. It is readiness shaped by love for God. And perhaps the final question this passage leaves each listener with is simple. If today were the moment of accountability, Would your life reflect faithfulness? Not perfection, but direction. Not fear, but readiness. Because Jesus' call is not to panic, but to stay awake spiritually, to live aware of God, to serve faithfully in every season, and to remain ready. Thank you for watching this video. If this message encouraged your heart today, please like this video, subscribe to Holy Path Insights, share this message with someone who needs spiritual encouragement and renewed focus. May we live watchfully, faithfully, and ready in every season, honoring God with our lives each day.